So, was he a monster, a religious fanatic, or was he a prophet? He led one of the most famous and bloodiest slave rebellions in American history. But who really was Nat Turner? Today, we're going to dive deep into his story by looking at two, completely conflicting accounts. The official confession that ultimately sealed his fate, and the incredibly controversial novel that tried to imagine what was going on inside his head.
Okay, let's set the scene. The year is 1831. We're in Southampton, Virginia, and you can just imagine the atmosphere here. The air is absolutely thick with fear, with anger, with this thirst for revenge. Why? Because a slave rebellion, one of the most violent in the nation's history, has just been crushed, and the entire South is terrified. And here we have the official word on the matter from a man named Thomas R. Gray. He's the lawyer who's about to take Turner's confession. And just listen to the language here. It's so cold, so clinical, so final. You see, this isn't just a report. This is a statement of control. It's the slaveholding South saying, "We handled it. Justice has been served. Everyone involved is either dead or has been captured." Well, almost everyone.
Because for 2 months, the leader, Nat Turner, was on the run. But now, he's been caught. He's locked away in a jail cell in a town called Jerusalem, of all places, and he's about to tell his side of the story. But that leaves a huge question, right? Whose version of the story is history actually going to remember?
And this, right here, this is the heart of the whole thing. On one side, you've got the public record from 1831, the official story. And it paints Turner as this one-dimensional monster, a gloomy fanatic, totally remorseless, even diabolical. But then, on the other side, you've got William Styron's 1967 novel. And it imagines this incredibly complex inner world. A man tormented, yes, but also driven by these powerful visions, a deep belief in a divine purpose. One is history, the other is fiction. And somewhere in between is the real Nat Turner.
So let's actually go inside that jail cell with him, because Styron's novel doesn't start with the blood and fire of the rebellion. No, it starts right here, in the cold, quiet, terrifying aftermath, as Turner faces the end.
And what the novel does so powerfully is it throws you right into the physical reality of his prison. This isn't some abstract historical fact. It's the feeling of cold, heavy iron biting into his skin. It's the damp chill that gets into his bones. It's the suffocating darkness and the sound, the choked, rattling breath of his friend Hark dying in the cell right next to him. It's meant to be visceral, immediate.
But those physical chains, they were nothing compared to what was happening inside his head. The real torture was spiritual. For 5 days, this man, this prophet, who believed he was God's chosen weapon, who saw signs in the sky, has been met with total, crushing, divine silence. He tries to pray, and nothing happens. In his darkest hour, the God who he believes started this whole thing has just abandoned him.
And this is how the novel describes that void. It's not that he's losing his faith. It's something much worse. It's as if a giant wall has just been slammed down between him and his creator. Can you even imagine the psychological horror of that? The God who told you to start a war, who promised you victory, has just vanished the second you've lost. The silence must have been deafening.
So in the middle of all this silence, his lawyer shows up, and Turner decides, okay, it's time to talk. But he's not going to talk about the rebellion, not really. He's going to go back to the beginning. He's going to talk about the vision.
You see, in the novel, this sense of destiny wasn't some idea he cooked up as a grown man. No, this was a weight placed on his shoulders when he was just a kid, something that kind of haunted him. It was this recurring vision that was both beautiful and deeply strange, a divine riddle he knew he was born to solve.
And this is the image that obsessed him. A perfect white marble temple, stark white, silent, and completely sealed, with no doors and no windows. In his mind, it's standing all alone on a cliff by the sea. This image would just flash in his head, over and over for years. He knew it was a sacred symbol, and he knew that understanding its meaning was the key to understanding his own purpose on Earth.
So the big question is, what on earth did it mean? For Turner, everything was a sign, Every dream, every Bible verse, they were all just pieces of a giant divine puzzle. And this temple, it was the centerpiece. He just had to wait with total faith for God to finally tell him what it was all about.
And then, right there in the silence of his jail cell, he believes God finally speaks again. He gets the final piece of the puzzle, and the command is, confess.
So get this, for him, confessing isn't admitting defeat. It's the final act of his prophecy. The war might be lost, but the story must be told so that the whole world knows that this wasn't his idea. It was commanded by God.
And that mission? Well, that mission led to pure, bloody chaos on August 21st, 1831. The vision finally became violence. The prophecy became a rebellion.
And it all happened so fast, and it was absolutely brutal. It starts with the killing of his own master's family. And then within just 48 hours, his army of enslaved men grows to over 70. They sweep from one plantation to the next like a storm of revenge, leaving dozens of white men, women, and children dead. But the backlash is just as fast and just as brutal. The rebellion is crushed, and Turner himself, he just vanishes. He manages to hide for 2 whole months before he's finally found.
But here's where the story takes a really strange turn. Amidst all this bloodshed, all this violence that he set in motion, guess how many people Nat Turner killed with his own hands? Just one.
And that's the exact question his lawyer, Thomas Gray, just hammers him on. It just doesn't add up, right? Come on, Reverend, you were the leader. Why would a man who believed he was God's sword of vengeance, why would he hesitate when it was finally time to strike? And this contradiction, this gap between the divine command to kill and his own human reluctance to do it, that is right at the heart of this whole psychological drama.
And that question, that paradox, takes us right into the courtroom. And this is where the story gets ripped out of his hands. His legacy is now going to be shaped and twisted by the very system he was trying to burn to the ground.
So, you've got Thomas Gray, he's the one who wrote down the confession. Now he stands up in front of the court, and he's not there to defend Turner. Oh no, he's there to explain him, to package this whole terrifying event into a neat little story that the white South can understand, and more importantly, use.
And what he says? Well, it becomes the official story. Gray argues that the whole rebellion was doomed from the start. Not because of bad strategy or being outnumbered, but because of, and this is a direct quote, the biological and spiritual inferiority of the Negro character. It's a really chilling moment because what he's doing is reducing this incredibly complex act of rebellion down to racist junk science. It's a narrative designed to make the white South feel safe again, to reassure them that their system could never really be threatened.
So we come full circle, right back to where we started. You have these two completely different stories. You've got the historical document, the confession published by Gray, which frames Turner as a simple, delusional fanatic, a cautionary tale to scare others and keep the system of slavery locked in place. And then, more than 100 years later, you have the novel, which tries to give him back his humanity, to see him as this tragic, flawed, but brilliant man struggling with a real spiritual calling in a world that was just pure evil.
One story was literally used to justify oppression. The other was written to challenge it. Which leaves us with a really tough question, a question we all have to think about. When history is written by the victors, how do we ever find the truth about the people who dared to fight back?